Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, you guys, this is from Oregon State University. Defend dissent. I don't know what that must be the subject matter. I don't know. This article is called Mechanisms. Well, it's not an article. I think it's more like a journal or like miniature book. Let's see, here's the contents. Mechanisms of social movement suppression. Please listen carefully, you guys. Before reading this chapter, it's a good idea to reread the introductory chapter, Why Digital Security, and recall that our primary focus in this book is U.S. social movements. What you'll learn. By the way, the other really good book that I had found on this, the link was broken. What you'll learn. 1. How the U.S. suppresses social movements. It's not just the United States. This happens everywhere. But I guess they are focusing on U.S. What COINTELPRO, I don't know if I'm saying it right, counterintelligence program was, and the mechanisms employed to suppress social movements of that era. The U.S. has a long history of interference, including on its own soil, in the form of suppressing the efforts of social movements and, in particular, liberatory and leftist social movements. Labor organizing, independence, civil rights, and environmental movements have all been subject to opposition by the U.S. government, often at the behest of or in cooperation with large corporations. Goes even higher than that. In trying to grapple with the risks associated with a social movement, not attending to digital security, it is helpful to look at how the state has interfered with social movements in the past. This history can be overwhelming, and it can be tempting to dismiss this as something that has happened in the past. But that is not happening now. Going through this history can also lead to defeatism, especially in light of the additional digitally enhanced tools that the state can employ against an adversary, perceived or actual. However, since we should not condemn ourselves to repeat mistakes of the past, we need to attend to enough history to learn appropriate lessons so that our movements may be successful moving forward. In order to do so without turning this into a history textbook, we draw on the scholarship of Jules Boykoff, who categorized the ways in which the U.S. has messed with social movements in the 20th century. Boykoff enumerated 12 modes of suppression, which we compress to 7 in this presentation. Understanding these historical modes will allow us to predict how digital surveillance could support or enhance those modes, as we will discuss in the chapter Digital Threats to Social Movements. But more importantly, we will be able to see how encryption and attending to digital hygiene can protect social movements against some of these oppositional forces, as we will cover in part 3 of this book. Modes of suppression. These are 7 ways in which the U.S. has suppressed and continues to suppress social movements, each with a few examples of its use. Unfortunately, these examples are far from exhaustive. 1. Direct violence. Beatings, bombing, shootings, and other forms of violence are carried out by the blank, just read it, you guys, or other institutions or nodes of power against dissident citizens. This may be the result of the policing of large groups, such as when the Ohio Army National Guard fired at students during an anti-war protest at Kent State University, blanking 4 people and injuring 9 others, or targeted assassinations, such as in the FBI-organized night raid shooting of Black Panther Party leader Fred Hampton. To risk an understatement, these actions discourage participation in social movements for fear of life and limb. 2. The legal system. The legal system allows for harassment, arrests, public prosecutions, and hearings, and extraordinary laws that are used to interfere with individuals in biased fashions. The state arrests activists for minor charges, where have we seen that are often false and sometimes based on obscure statutes that have remained on the books, buried and dormant, but nevertheless providing vessels for selective legal persecution. Public prosecutions and hearings can land dissidents in jail or consume their resources in legal proceedings that sidetrack their activism and demobilize their movements. Current supporters and potential allies are discouraged from putting forth dissident views. Prosecution and hearings publicized in the mass media reverberate outward into the public sphere. Another form of legal suppression, the state promulgates and enforces exceptional laws and rules to tie up activists in the criminal justice labyrinth. This is the legal system being used to squelch dissent. Yeah, it's important to pay attention to laws and addendums, etc. And I'm a newbie with this, so little guys are not supposed to air anything, you know. Controversial stop and frisk programs allow police officers to briefly detain and at times search people without probable cause. Free speech zones greatly limit the time, place, and manner of protests. Those arrested at First Amendment protected protests on the inauguration of Donald Trump faced public prosecutions that were unlikely to ever reach a conviction. And certain crimes such as arson or the destruction of property are elevated to terrorism when they are accompanied by a political motive and allow for the state to greatly increase the punishment doled out. It's like, it reminds me like it's just this big open space, and like some people say, I can't think who was saying this, they take whatever will stick. Other laws are specifically tailored to prevent activism, such as ag-gag laws, which criminalize the filming of agricultural operations, which is done to expose the abuse of animals. Yeah, it's pretty bad, you guys. Where have we seen this before? 3. Employment deprivation. One's political beliefs can result in threats to, or actual loss of, employment due to one's political beliefs or activities. Would that go for medical beliefs or body beliefs or Some dissidents are not hired in the first place because of their political beliefs. This is typically carried out by employers through the blank, can have a powerful direct or indirect influence. Recently, we have seen university professors forced out of their jobs or have job offers revoked, as with Stephen Salaida, whose offer of employment as a professor of American Indian Studies was withdrawn following university donors' objections to a series of tweets critical of Israel and Zionism. Well, you guys know you can't do that, right? For several years, but since struck down by a federal court, government contractors in Texas were required to sign a pledge to not participate in the pro-Palestinian boycott. Isn't that mixing state with... Wait, no, that wouldn't be... No, I was thinking mixing state with religion. That, I guess that's not the same. Something seemed like it was crossed there. And sanctioned movement, or else they would have their contracts canceled. This resulted in the firing of an American citizen of Palestinian descent who worked as a school speech pathologist and refused to sign the statement. Wouldn't it be interesting, you guys, if people just said that's okay and you can find someone else? If more people did that, things would change. We can only do what we can do in our little sphere, I guess. 4, conspicuous surveillance. Conspicuous surveillance aims primarily not to collect information, which is best done surreptitiously, whatever that is, but to intimidate. This is intended to result in a chilling effect, like fair gaming, in which individuals guard their speech and action out of a fear of reprisal. Oh, wait a minute. Like the anti-people and the covering of your arm and stuff these last 4 years? It may drive away those engaged in activism or make it difficult to encourage new activists. I'm going to say this again, and you guys have to get my message. Those engaged in activism or make it difficult to encourage new activists. Although the chilling effect has been deemed unconstitutional, of course it is difficult to prove harm in a court as required. So it is a safe means of suppression from the perspective of the surveiller. The FBI has a long history of knock and talks. I never heard that. I never heard of that before. Or simply visiting the houses of dissidents and activists and those of their families and employers to have a chat in order to let people know that they are being watched. Well, we all know now with social media and everything else. 5, covert surveillance. Surveillance might be concentrated or focused, as with the use of spies, targeted wiretaps, and subpoenas, or warrants for data. The use of infiltrators, covert agents who become members of the target group. Listen what I said. Covert agents who become members of the target group. Or the use of informants, existing group members who are paid or threatened in order to extract information. Surveillance might also be diffused, such as the accumulation, storage, and analysis of individual and group information that is obtained through internet monitoring, mail openings, and other mass surveillance techniques. Are you guys seeing the patterns right now? I hope you are. The scale of the FBI informant program is sizable, having over 15,000 informants in 2008. Wow. In the wake of 9-you-know-what, the FBI and large law enforcement agencies, such as the NYPD, turned their intelligence programs against Muslim American communities. This included the close surveillance of lawyers, professors, and the executive director of the largest Muslim civil rights organization in the U.S., the Council on American Islamic Relations by the FBI. The NYPD singled out mosques and Muslim student associations, organizations, and businesses. Does this sound familiar to you guys? Through the use of informants, infiltrators, and surveillance, the NYPD's supposed rationale was to identify potential terrorists by looking for radicalization indicators. You guys, can you imagine that? Like any one of us could just be walking down the street, minding our business. I'm just saying. Including First Amendment protected activities, such as wearing traditional Islamic clothing and growing a beard and becoming involved in social activism. My question is, too, who gets to define what social activism is? When you're protecting children from being harmed, what is that called? 6, deception. Oh, we're already in this. Snitch jacketing is when a person, often an infiltrator, intentionally generates suspicion. I'm going to read this again. Snitch jacketing is when a person, often an infiltrator, intentionally generates suspicion that an authentic activist is a state informant or otherwise maliciously present in a social movement group. In other words, like pointing the finger and calling people, saying that they're doing this or this or this, and discrediting them. Infiltrators or informants who are in place to encourage violence or illegal activities or tactics rather than simply report on activities are known as agent provocateurs, and do so in order to legally entrap or discredit. That's what I was just saying. Legally entrap or discredit the group. False propaganda is the use of fabricated documents that are designed to create schisms or undermine solidarity between activist organizations. These controversial, offending, and sometimes vicious documents are meant to foment dissension within and between groups. FBI infiltrators have acted as agent provocateurs by leading them down a path to illegal activity. In other words, baiting them, I guess, that they would not have otherwise followed, because then they can blackmail them. You guys getting it? Muhammad was an Oregon State University student who was contacted by an undercover FBI agent and who over a period of 5 months suggested and provided the means to BOMB, the lighting of the Portland Christmas tree on November 26, 2010. The BOMB was a fake, but Mohammed was sentenced to 30 years of imprisonment. There's more to this, but I think this is good. Eric McDavid spent nearly 9 years in prison for conspiring to damage corporate and government property after a paid FBI informant acted as an agent provocateur. After a paid FBI informant acted as an agent provocateur, encouraging McDavid's group to engage in property destruction. Yeah, then it's criminal. You guys see? Cops do it too. In providing them with BOMB making information, money to buy the raw materials needed, transportation, and a cabin to work in, McDavid's conviction was overturned due to the FBI failing to disclose potentially exculpatory evidence to the defense. Seven, mass media influence. There are two major types of mass media manipulation. One, story implantation, whereby the state makes use of friendly press contacts who publish government-generated articles verbatim. Oh, that's been going on a long time. Or with minor adjustments. And two, strong arming, whereby the state intimidates journalists or editors. Does that sound familiar? Like Scientology? To withhold unwanted information from reaching publication. There's no freedom of press. In some ways, it's not what we think. In addition to that, mass media deprecation portrays dissidents as ridiculous, like a tinfoil hat, bizarre, oh, he's got mental health, dangerous, he was known to, carry blank, 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 or otherwise out of step with mainstream society. This is often not so much due to conspiracy as to dutiful adherence to journalistic norms and values. Mass media underestimation occurs when activists and the state come up with discrepant estimates of crowd sizes for protests, marches, and other activities, with the mass media tending to accept the state's lower numbers. Oh yeah, well, we all know. The mass media may also falsely balance dissidents with counter-demonstrators. Oh, it's just so much more deep. But anyways. And I believe the cops are always, working with, the people who are organizing these type things. Many dissident efforts never make it onto the mass media's agenda or are buried in the minor sections of the newspaper. This is a little bit older of a book. Not only the state, but also powerful media organizations or individual owners are able to carry out this type of suppression. Following the invasion of Iraq after 9/11, anti-war sentiment was consistently downplayed through underreporting. As just one example, the September 2006 anti-war protests that saw more than 200,000 people take to the streets across the U.S. was reported by the Oregonian in this way. A 100,000-strong anti-war protest in Washington, D.C. was reported on page 10. Yeah, they've been doing this forever. Along with an article on a Portland protest. The article estimated 100 people at the protest, even though aerial evidence pointed to over 3,000. A counter demonstration to the Washington, D.C. anti-war protest was covered on page 2. Well, you guys all know who creates the wars, right? With a larger photo and longer text, even though only 400 people attended. Information technology interference. This resource would be lacking if we didn't talk about censorship and other interference with information technology. It is an additional mode of suppression with particular relevance to the information age that dovetails with deception and mass media influence, wherein access to the internet or related infrastructure is blocked or otherwise denied to social movements. It doesn't matter anymore. For example, cutting off internet or mobile network access during a protest, censoring certain sites or types of internet traffic, or shutting down a social movement group's website. I believe in my heart, I think in the end it doesn't matter. There's a lot of things that can be done. And then, I mean, if you lose your life in this time, I believe you reincarnate. So, it's my belief system. Boykoff does not include this in his catalog of suppression, since its use is not widespread within the U.S. by the U.S., largely due to the country's constitutional protections. Yeah, but the funny thing is, how many times have we seen like these really diabolical ways that wealthy organizations or Hollywood companies that are hurting children, they have a lot of money, and they completely deny your constitutional rights by like throwing something different out that's not even applicable to you or the people that are voicing their opinions. However, its use is widespread around the globe. They use it here too, but it's just the way they do it is different. Governments have been known to cut off internet access at the country level. I don't know. I got so many thoughts. Such as the week-long total shutdown of the internet in Iran as a means to suppress protests. That just makes people more mad. Or limit access to certain sources such as the Great Firewall of China blocking Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Wikipedia. U.S. companies also participate in this, complying with foreign censorship. I don't know, I got so many thoughts. Zoom, a web conferencing service, shut down the accounts of 3 activists at the behest of China who had planned online events to commemorate the Tiananmen Square massacre. In context, the COINTELPRO and the COINTELPRO era, from the 1950s through the 1970s, the FBI conducted a set of secret domestic counterintelligence activities, which became known as COINTELPRO, under the leadership of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, originating with U.S. government anti-communist programs during the Red Scare. You guys ever notice there's always a scare, isn't there? COINTELPRO aimed to disrupt by any means necessary the organizing. Doesn't that sound like a Scientology? By any means necessary. The organizing and activist efforts of the Black Power, Puerto Rican independence, civil rights, and other movements. With respect to civil rights and Black Power movements, including the activities of Martin Luther King Jr. COINTELPRO was ordered to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit. I'm going to say these again because they're important. To expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of black nationalist, hate-type organizations and groupings. Their leadership, spokesmen, membership, and supporters to counter their propensity for violence and civil disorder. I don't even think a lot of these movements were violent. I'm just saying in general. I'm not saying that I know a lot about all these movements. But also, too, they will manipulate things to make it look like people are violent when they're not. COINTELPRO was exposed through the theft of boxes full of sensitive FBI paperwork obtained through a burglary in 1970. Another burglary? Are you guys seeing the patterns? In 1971, by the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI, the members of which only went public in the wake of Ed Snowden's disclosures, with remaining COINTELPRO documents coming to light through Freedom of Information Act requests. The Commission's leak resulted in the formation of the U.S. Senate's Church Committee in 1975, which castigated the FBI for the domestic intelligence activities that have invaded individual privacy and violated the rights of lawful assembly and political expression, and ultimately shut down COINTELPRO. Probably just changed names. The Church Committee prefaced their admonishment this way: "We have segments of our government, in their attitudes and action, adopt tactics unworthy of a democracy and occasionally reminiscent of totalitarian regimes." Like the last 4 years? "We have seen a consistent pattern in which programs initiated with limited goals, such as preventing criminal violence or identifying foreign spies, were expanded to what witnesses characterized as vacuum cleaners, sweeping in information about lawful activities of American citizens. The tendency of intelligence activists to expand beyond their initial scope is a theme which runs through every aspect of our investigative findings. Intelligence collection programs naturally generate ever-increasing demands for new data, and once intelligence has been collected, there are strong pressures to use it against the target. All the following modes of suppression were used by the FBI or support partners as part of COINTELPRO or against COINTELPRO targets. 1. Direct violence. The murder of Fred Hampton, mentioned above, was a joint operation of the FBI and Chicago Police Department. Fred Hampton was the chairman of the Black Panther Party, a revolutionary socialist political organization of the late 1960s through 1970s that aimed to protect Black Americans and provide social programs such as free breakfast and health clinics. The Black Panther Party, BPP, was labeled as a black nationalist hate group. You see, they always use that word hate, don't they? Always. By the FBI for inclusion, also that's a way to divide. Inclusion as a COINTELPRO target. Hampton's assassination was supported by other modes of suppression, including the following. Covert surveillance. A paid FBI infiltrator provided intelligence that made the raid leading to Hampton's murder possible. Deception. The same infiltrator created an atmosphere of distrust and suspicion within the BPP. Atmosphere of distrust and suspicion within the BPP. That's how they break it up. In part by snitch jacketing, other members of the BPP. Mass media influence. Following Hampton's assassination, BPP members were depicted as folk devils, with media representations becoming increasingly distorted. 2. The legal system. Communist and Black Panther Party member and COINTELPRO target Angela Davis was charged with aggravated kidnapping and first-degree murder in the death of a judge in California who was kidnapped and killed during a melee with police. Even though Davis was not on the scene. California held that the GUNs used by the kidnappers were owned by Davis. Sounds like they planted evidence. And considered all persons concerned in the commission of a crime, whether they directly commit the act constituting the offense, principals in any crime so committed. Davis could not be found at the time and was listed by J. Edgar Hoover on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Months later, Davis was apprehended and spent 16 months in prison, awaiting a trial in which she was found not guilty. 3. Employment deprivation. Prior to Davis's battle with the legal system, Davis was fired from her job as a philosophy professor at UCLA for her Communist Party membership in her first year of employment in 1969, called unsuitable to teach in the California system. Looks like they've been doing this for a long time with the whole employment stuff. The firing was at the request of then California Governor Ronald Reagan, who appointed to a 1949 outlawing the hiring of communists in the University of California. It's always like a different, if you guys notice, it's always like a different label that they give a person. So they can make the general public do what they want, or the group do what they want. And then they have a fall guy or a fall girl. This highlights the lingering Red Scare era, or McCarthyism, that ran through the 1940s and 1950s. The FBI supported the demonization of communism through a predecessor program called COINTELPRO, ComInfil. Communist infiltration probed and tracked the activities of labor, social justice, and racial equality movements. They can do all this, but they can't break up Scientology. 4. Conspicuous surveillance. Among the first round of FBI documents to come to light about COINTELPRO was a document memo called New Left Notes. The New Left refers to a broad political movement of the 1960s and 1970s, groups of which campaign on social issues such as civil, political, women's, gay, and abortion rights, in discussing how to deal with New Left problems. Interesting how they never have, they never show you like children's protection or anything in these. You notice that? The FBI Philadelphia Field Office memo says, there was a pretty general consensus that more interviews with these subjects and hangers-on are in order for plenty of reasons, chief of which are, it will enhance the paranoia endemic. Say that again. It will enhance the paranoia endemic in these circles, and will further serve to get the point across that there is an FBI agent behind every mailbox. Reminds me of those Big Brother posters. In addition, some will overcome will be overcome by the overwhelming personalities of the contacting agent, intimidated, and volunteer to tell all, perhaps on a continuing basis. 5. Covert surveillance. The Church Committee reported enumerated covert surveillance that was not only vastly excessive in breadth, but also often conducted by illegal or improper means. Of course it was. Only we have to follow the laws, don't you know that? Notably, both the CIA and FBI had mail opening programs that indiscriminately opened and photocopied letters mailed in the U.S. on a vast scale, nearly 250,000 by the CIA between 1953 and 1973, and another 130,000 by the FBI from 1940 to 1966. Further, both the CIA and the FBI lied about the continuation of these programs to President Nixon. Six, deception. The FBI often sent fake letters on flyers in order to drive wedges between otherwise aligned groups. Below is an example of a cartoon drawn by FBI operatives as a forgery of movement, participants, and is intended to incite violence between the black nationalist groups. Organization US, co-established by Maulana Karenga in the Black Panther Party, with prominent members Huey Newton, David Hillard, Bobby Seale, John Huggins, and Bunchy Carter. The cartoon depicts BPP being knocked off by Karenga. It's the Hegelian dialectic, you guys. The FBI later claimed success in the deaths of 2 BP members by U.S. GUN men. 7. Mass media influence. Manipulation of the mass media was an explicit tenet of the FBI's COINTELPRO against the New Left. According to the Church Committee, much of the Bureau's propaganda efforts involved giving information to friendly media sources who could be relied upon not to reveal the Bureau's interests. The Crime Records Division of the Bureau was responsible for public relations, including all headquarters contacts with the media. In course of its work, most of which had nothing to do with COINTELPRO. I know I'm saying this wrong. I think you say it COINTELPRO. I don't know. The division assembled a list of friendly news media sources, those who wrote pro-Bureau stories. Field offices also had confidential sources, unpaid Bureau informants in the media, and were able to ensure their cooperation. That was interesting. Oh, this is a cartoon. FBI cartoon to incite violence. Let me see what it says. Wow. So they got this guy sitting in a chair. It's so evil. Things to do today. And then they got these 2 guys' names crossed off. And then they got 2 other names, the Bobby Seale, Walter Wallace. So the 2 guys crossed off, they were offed. And what they did is they turned people against each other. I don't know exactly how they did it. And then here's where they got the resources. This is a really good article. So anyways, you guys, I will put a link of this book in the description. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night wherever you are.